Hey everyone, this is Will Costello, the Estates Ambassador for Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills Estates, joining you today for another of our video opportunities to get together with the team who make the wines of Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills Estates, and we're joined today by our winemaker, Anthony Avila. Hey, good to have you.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. How's everybody doing?
What was Carol's husband's name?
I don't remember. But we believe the hype.
I bet he said that for a little while too.
Yeah.
Until he didn't anymore.
Obviously, we're quarantined at home just like everyone else.
Well, where are you joining us from today?
I'm actually at the winery at the Bien Nacido property today.
What are you standing in front of? I see some barrels behind you.
This is our entire production of the 2019 Chardonnays, so Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills.
What is the total production you're expecting for this vintage?
I'd have to look at the exact numbers. I think for Bien Nacido, it's probably in that 450 cases. Solomon Hills is probably going to be a little less than that, maybe high 300s, low 400s.
What would you say is your philosophy of winemaking, with something that's that small?
It can sound a little cliche to say, but I really honestly believe that wine is grown and that it's not made. So, in that light, what we do is we try to focus really extensively on farming the vineyard as well as we can, using organic inputs as much as possible, not using herbicides. Everything's meticulously farmed by hand. I like to get all the hard work done out in the field. And that way, when we get the grapes into the winery, I take a position that's mostly, focused in shepherding that wine to where it's going to end up eventually. I think of myself more as a shepherd and less of a guide. So, we don't have like a big bag of magic tricks. We're not really adding anything to the wines. We're not trying to take anything away from the wines. So it's a real hands-off approach that's focused on the farming.
Well, what is happening in the farm right now? Where are you guys in the season? What does the vineyard look like?
So the vineyard looks really good. We just had bud break probably about a month ago in our earlier Pinot Noir sections. So we've got green shoots growing on the vines that are probably 6 to 8 inches tall right now. We're getting into kind of our really traditional Santa Maria Valley spring. So it's cold. It's been windy. That's super typical. When the inland valleys just to the east of us start to warm up, they really draw that cold air off the Pacific Ocean. We're only about 15 miles from the ocean. It's 55 to 58 degrees. So this time of year, basically by 1 o'clock, 1:30 at the latest, we're looking at sustained, 15 to 20 mile an hour cold winds that come off the ocean. It's kind of unpleasant as a human being, but I think it's part of what makes the wines taste so good.
Now, does that have any, for some of the people who are watching who want to get a little more into the weeds here, does that wind cause any issues when it's talking about bud break, when we're talking about flowering, any of that stuff?
Yeah, it actually can cause several issues. The first problem that you get is the vines actually shut down at a certain level of wind speed. The vines drink water at this stage by what's called evapotranspiration, where there's little holes on the leaves that evaporate water. That produces a vacuum in the plant, pulls water up to the leaves. And if that happens too much, the vascular system of the plant can actually collapse and kill the plant. So once the wind starts blowing and the evaporation starts happening too quickly and too much, the vines actually close down those little holes to protect themselves. So you basically, at a certain wind speed, you almost get complete vine shutdown for the day. And it can also cause trouble during flowering. The flowers on the vines are super delicate. They're these tiny little yellow flowers, and the wind can knock them off. It can blow the pollen around. So we generally have a pretty challenging flowering here because of the wind and because of the cold weather.
What does that end up doing to the wine?
It means we usually see really small yields. The clusters tend to be really small. There tend to be, instead of fully formed grapes in these nice big bunches, you can actually see what we call shot berries, which are these little green berries that never fully formed. that's because the flower had come off before it was properly pollinated. We call that shatter. And it, unfortunately, those little green berries don't taste very good when they're fermented. So it does create kind of a winemaking challenge for us here.
Is that the same thing that they would generally call chicks and hens, or is that something different?
Yeah, Miller-Ondage or hens and chicks, I think what you're thinking about there is where you have large grapes nestled in amongst small grapes that are fully formed. They're not those little green berries. They're just very different sizes right now. That's actually something that we try to encourage a little bit in the Chardonnay. We like to see more of those little tiny grapes that are super, super concentrated. I think there's a lot of the good stuff in there.
What is your winemaking history?
I got into food and wine working in the restaurant business while I was going to college up at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is about 40 minutes from here. Kind of got introduced to the great wines of the world there. It was a really cool mom and pop restaurant, and every time something got opened, we all got together, tried it, talked about it. And then there I was studying finance at Cal Poly, and it took me a little bit less than a year to figure out that I didn't really like being a stockbroker after I graduated. And a friend of mine set me up with a job down in the Santa Rita Hills as a harvest intern for a little winery down there, making mostly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And that was 2011, and haven't looked back since. Then had the opportunity to go to New Zealand and Argentina, make wine in both of those places. If you guys haven't been to Argentina, I can't recommend it enough. It's amazing, and the wines are great too. And then actually when I got back from Argentina in 2013, I had the opportunity to come on full-time here at the estate as the assistant winemaker, and I've been helping make the wines here since then. And when our previous winemaker left right before harvest this past year, the Miller family asked me to stay on and keep making the wines. So 2019 was my first vintage as the winemaker here.
Well, going back to your philosophy that you said about, the wine is made in the vineyard, taking your time to make sure that your organic practices and your non-interventionist happens within the vineyard. What happens, and where does your philosophy at your sort of signature come into the wines?
Everyone makes wine so differently. I think that you can't help but put your accent on it. I like to think of winemaking as the sum total of like 1,000 small choices, and no one person is going to make the same 1,000 choices that I would make. So I think the wines will definitely be different. They are different, just based purely on that. But I think from a perspective of non-interventional winemaking, I'm hoping to highlight the vineyard and vintage variability in the wines. Like I said, we don't have like a big bag of magic tricks where, if a wine doesn't seem concentrated enough, we can do something about it. So what we do is we try to keep the yields low in the vineyard so we get nice, complex, concentrated wines in the winery. By the same token, we can't dip into that, metaphorical bag of tricks to take anything away from the wine. So we're really careful during fermentation so we don't get too much extraction. We don't get any of those like astringent kind of harsh flavors, because we can't take those away. So it's just really like a holistic approach to trying to do everything right the first time.
Do the frogs add anything to the wine?
My frog in the background there. He's got great timing, doesn't he?
Do you know where he is at all? He just lives there, or he's hiding somewhere and you can't find him?
No, well, he and his 10,000 friends that live in here, they've all got little hidden spots, so I don't think I'd be able to find them, unfortunately.
Well, it's funny. You were saying, that what you try to do is highlight the vintage variability, and you talked about 1 month ago was when bud break happened. Is 2020 turning out to be similar in any way? I know it's early, but similar to any vintages that you have worked with in the region?
It's funny. I was thinking about that today, actually. I was out walking around a couple blocks earlier, and it's the same and different, because we had a lot of rain early on in the winter this year. It started out, before the first of the year, we had a couple of rainstorms and it was nice and cold. And I thought to myself, okay, great. It's going to be a cold, wet winter. The vines are going to get a good long sleep and they're going to come back well rested. It's just going to be great. And then, during the month of January, we did not get one drop of rain. And we actually had a couple of days, maybe a whole week where it was like in the mid 70s, maybe even upper 70s. So consequently, we had an early bud break. We're kind of, normal for us is like early to mid-March bud break. And we had bud break in February this year, which is a little more similar to the drought vintages, 14, 15, and 16, 15 being the most extreme of those vintages. And, that's typical of warm, dry conditions. The vines coming back from dormancy is all about soil temperature. So when you don't get any rain and you have nice warm temperatures, especially in like the sandy kind of light soils that we have, specifically at Salmon Hills, you just get the vines waking up earlier because of those conditions. And I think we're probably going to be harvesting Pinot, I would say mid-August, if not early August this year, and maybe be done at the end of October, kind of early November with Syrah.
Is that going to change your opinion on how you're going to manage the vineyard right now, or does that all start to come later on?
It's really going to depend on what our summer weather is like. That's really going to flesh out the vintage. What the weather is like during flowering, what the weather's like during, kind of the ripening phase and things like that, to see what the vintage is really going to be. We have had a challenging couple of weeks here. We actually, thankfully, we are above our average rainfall for this year. We're at 14 inches, I think I heard, here at the vineyard, which is 2 more than our average, but it all came during the spring after bud break. So what that does is it keeps the vineyard surface really wet. You don't really want to drive a tractor down all of those rows when the soil is really wet because of compaction, because the tractor can slip. There's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do that. So that part of it's been challenging, but the weather looks good from here on out. And I know they've got the vineyard mowed and the crews are going through and starting to shoot thin and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see what this summer is going to bring.
Well, so you talk about low rainfall, you talk about high wind, you talk about cold springs, difficult growing condition. Why Santa Maria and why Bien Nacido? What about this region and vineyard, inspired you to work with these wines?
I think it kind of goes back to my introduction to fine wine in the restaurant business. Working at a restaurant that was only about 40 miles from here, I just had an opportunity to have all these different wines from Bien Nacido, from all these great different, there's so many producers that make a Bien Nacido, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and they're all good. And so they were kind of the first local wines that I really took a shine to. And so when the opportunity, arose for me to come and work here full time, it's one of the oldest vineyards in Santa Barbara County. It's one of the best. It was no choice for me, really.
Well, I think this is an interesting point to note for some of our viewers. And for those of you who don't know, Bien Nacido is a giant vineyard. The whole property is a little over 2,100 acres with over 730 acres planted to grapes. But Anthony, you work for the estate as opposed to just the vineyard. So it's important to mention there are many, many people who make Bien Nacido vineyard wines, but it's much more rare to see a wine at the estate because there's only one estate, and it's the people who own the vineyard, have a winery built on the property where you're standing, and of course, bottle the wine on the property. Is there something special about what makes an estate wine worthy of that title?
I think there definitely is. It's different when you own the vineyard and farm the vineyard as opposed to just buying fruit from a great vineyard. I think, I have a much closer relationship to the vineyard staff. We work together day in and day out, and I'm here. every single day. So, I think a more typical pattern you see from wineries that are buying fruit from great vineyards, they tend to go out a couple times during the growing season, interface with the vineyard staff, maybe over the phone. Whereas we actually get to go out, we have blocks that are specific for the estate program that we get fruit from every single year, that we're essentially in control of the farming with the vineyard staff. So I think it's just a much closer relationship with the land and with the farming team.
So if you were going to pick, if you had every single, and I'm assuming you do have every single vintage in your cellar, if you were going to pick one and you had your favorite winemaker from Argentina coming to dinner, is there one specific bottle of the estate wines that you would pull out that's special to you?
That is a great question. I think I would probably have to choose the 14 X Block Syrah.
It's insane. It's
14
an amazing
was a
wine.
great vintage. 14, I think, reds and whites was an amazing vintage. That was actually the first year that we made the X Block wine here at the estate winery. So it's special to me because of that. And I think, if you really want to impress some cool guy, Argentine winemaker, that's a good place to start.
I'll add a little context for some of our wine club members or viewers. So the X Block is one of the most heralded portions of Syrah planted in all of the Nacido. It was actually originally planted to Riesling and ended up being grafted over in the early 1980s to Syrah, where everyone thought Syrah was way too cold to grow. And it has been continuously one of the most sought after small block portions of the period. I mean, there is a waiting list of a dozen years long if you want to purchase fruit from the X Block. And me, that 2014 vintage, I've tasted it a few times in the last couple of years, and it's still 15 years away from being at its peak. It's really a world-class wine. Do you generally bring Bien Nacido bottles to parties and when you're getting together with other winemakers and when you have your friends from Argentina coming to town, or do you pull something from somewhere else around the world?
No, I bring it's kind of a mix, I would say. I love to share the Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills wines with my friends and family. When you're the winemaker, everybody wants to try the wine that you make. So it's fun to, the Nacido Syrah is so good at a backyard barbecue, or, go fish up a lingcod and have some fish tacos with the Chardonnay.
Yeah. I literally drink the Kool-Aid too. I'm drinking some of the 2016 Solomon Hills Vengris Rosé that we made. And I definitely would say it is a drink wine. Drink now wine. We probably will finish this tonight. We made some Chile Verde, and it's in the pot. And you can just smell the aromatics starting to go. And the way I make my Chile Verde, it's very, very tomatillo heavy. So it's lots of green, kind of herbal, lots of cilantro. And to me, this is like the perfect thing to have with that on a warm day in Las Vegas.
Tuesday night lockdown.
Taco Tuesday, right? Why would you say that someone should drink a bottle of the Bien Nacido estate wines over anything else from the region?
I think people should drink the estate wines because I love to drink them. It's just such a special program. We're making wines from two of the best vineyards here in Santa Barbara County, which I think is one of the best growing regions in California. The Miller family have just provided us all the tools and all the resources that we need to make the best wines that we possibly can. It's a really small team. It's just myself and my assistant winemaker during the year, and we take on a couple of interns for harvest. So it's really handcrafted wines that taste like the vineyard. There's nothing but good grapes and good barrels in there, and I think the wines they're great with food. They're great by themselves. They might not be great with your in-laws, but maybe. I just think it's really special, and we don't make that much wine, and I really want to share it with everybody, and that's part of the fun for me is to let everybody know what we're doing here.
We have a number of sommeliers who watch this, people from a few Facebook groups watch our videos, and I know a lot of them like to ask the question of, would you consider your wines natural Can you comment on that?
You know, I mean, the way I understand natural wine is that it's not supposed to have an addition of sulfur dioxide. We do use sulfur as an antimicrobial and as an antioxidant. Because of the quality of the fruit that we get and the way we make wine, those numbers tend to be very low. We use just enough to get by. But you know, we don't inoculate with commercial yeast. We don't inoculate for malolactic fermentation. All that happens with the native yeast and bacteria that come in from the vineyard. So I think outside of the sulfur, they're close, but I wouldn't use the word natural.
And if you had to compare these wines, I know it's and sometimes unfair comparison, but we've been doing it since the 1970s during the tasting of Paris. Would you say that the wines from the Nacido estate compare to any of the wines from anywhere else around the world?
You know, a California-oriented, you know, relationship with old world wines, you know, specifically from France. You know, I mean, Burgundy is the home of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I mean, those are the kind of wines that I really enjoy drinking. And I think, you know, obviously we have a much different climate and much different soil than they do in France. But I think, you know, the colder growing season, there are a lot of parallels between the wines that we're making here and those kind of world wines.
And how about anywhere else in California? What do the wines from Santa Barbara taste like compared to, or even the estate wines compared to somewhere else in California? Is there something that people might be familiar with in terms of regions?
You mean, I mean, in terms of like similarities, I would say maybe we're closest to like the Sonoma Coast, very far west in the Sonoma Coast. So they too tend to have warmer temperatures than we do. So I think our wines might have a little bit more minerality and a little more acidity than some of those wines. They tend to be a little bit richer. And then, you know, obviously if you go kind of outside of really cold coastal regions, it's a big swing to, you know, cab regions and things like that. So it might not be as good of a comparison.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add? I want to thank you for your time today. I know the vines are just waking up and there's a lot of work to do still in the cellar to get prepared for when you're going to harvest later on this year. Anything else you want to tell any of our viewers?
I'll just thank everybody for tuning in. I'm super excited about the 2020 growing season. Try to check in with everybody and keep everybody updated about how it's going. Hopefully we just got done modeling our whole 2018 vintage in February, and I think that's going to be ready for release hopefully late summer, early fall. So super excited about that. So, and yeah, enjoy. I hope everybody's staying healthy and staying well.
Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, you can either post them below the video on Facebook, or you can reach Anthony at our Instagram, BN_Nacido_estate. I'll post the handle in the video. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks, Anthony.
All right. Thanks, guys.